Hello and welcome back to my Rime of the Frostmaiden Campaign Chronicle. This is going to be the second chronicle for session 6 of my sort of homebrewed Rime of the Frostmaiden campaign. Following the book mostly, but we are running it in Pathfinder 2nd edition, as well as, adding a bit of my own homebrew for my homebrew world to it, but for the most part, straight from the book. All right. I do recommend seeing part 1 of this, unless you just want to see this part for whatever reason. If you're one of my players, hopefully you like these. I'm not sure if they're super useful, but let's get into it. So to recap from session 6, this of course is taking place right after the party's climactic encounter with the male Yeti on the top of Kelvin's Cairn, or at least on a sharp precipice about halfway up Kelvin's Cairn. They did manage to defeat the Yeti with some creative thinking, including a grappling hook and a boulder. Otherwise, they probably would have TPK'd. Just being honest. So good for them. They managed to avoid that and win. And that's where we pick up this time. I believe at the end of last session, they actually did get a chance to do some looting. I didn't mention it though. The third member of that expedition that went up on Kelvin's Cairn was a magic user, and she had a spell book that Mythdorian the wizard found quite useful. It had, I don't know, I think like 8 or 10 new spells, so he was pretty stoked about that. That expanded his spell repertoire quite a bit. But interestingly enough, 2 new spells that aren't in the Pathfinder core rulebook, Blood Siphon and something else, Blood Magic spell. So these are mysterious spells that she has for some reason, and that's all the party knows for now. They decided to search around a bit as Toulon was hoping to find, and Toulon is the human barbarian played by Tyler. They were hoping to find his the polar bear, the were polar bear druid person who once saved him a long time ago. He recognized the name. That's actually who this expedition came up on Kelvin's Cairn to find. But unfortunately, did not find her at the top of this precipice. Perhaps on the summit of the mountain, perhaps somewhere else, she is known to around. But they couldn't find any trace, and sort of in defeat, they decide to scale down. Rather than going back all the way down the path, they kind of just decide to rope down into the crevice where the smote body of the Yeti lies, partially because they thought it might be an easy way to get out. Also because they wanted to skin the Yeti and get a Yeti pelt. So they do have a couple of those, one from the male and the female, back in the cave. So Yeti pelts in hand, they scale down the crevice with their climbing equipment, crevasse, and successfully make it down. And Toulon, using his survival skill, is able to very easily lead them out. There's a few winding caves. It would have been possible to get lost, but he has had a really good sense of direction and really just rolled well on his survival check. So he was able to lead them out without any issue. So once out of the mountain and sort of back down into the foothills, they were interested in maybe trying to find another way up the mountain to go look for the druid more. Mythdorian also let the party know that at some point he had received a magical message from from somebody, letting him know that he needed to go to East Haven for some reason. I'm going to leave this particularly vague, so no spoilers. I may do full context episodes later. In any case, Mythdorian has something weird going on and wants to go to East Haven. So after some discussion, the party decides that they're just going to go to East Haven. But as they're attempting to go away from the mountain, several crossbow bolts shoot out from the blowing wind and snow, and one does sink into Mythdorian's thigh and deal some damage. After the bolt's fired, 3 small dwarf-like forms appear, seemingly out of thin air. The party kind of deduces that these are Duergar. Not that difficult to recognize the signs. Basically dwarfs, but the evil version, if you want to get simplistic about it. In my world, it's basically dwarfs who have decided not to live with their moral, what do they call them? Handicaps. All of the races kind of have one of these darker sides of them, and they're not necessarily pure evil. It's just they really give in to their natural tendencies without really regarding moral obligations and things like that. However, that is a tangent, and let's move on. So anyways, the Duergar attack and then demand that the party surrender. Another voice calls from behind the party, also seemingly invisible. This one does not appear, and says that he knows the party has basically a black crystal shard, and the Duergar want it. And if the party gives it up, they can go on their way. Shardolin is what they're after, and the party had received one of these Shardolin shards. That's a tongue twister. From Trex, the suspicious kobold leader that they left back in Tourmaline. He gave it to Mythdorian and said that he didn't really have any need of it. Told the party that it could potentially be dangerous. And they had run into another shard as well. Yes, the one, the kind grandmotherly-like innkeeper from Bremen. Her son had actually also come upon one of these shards on an expedition, and it sort of changed him, made him go crazy, get violent, not act like himself. And then he was taken away by these mysterious strangers. So, the party knows that these shards are bad news. All right, brief interruption there. My wife got home, so I had to pause it quick. Now, continuing on. So, yes, the Duergar have ambushed the party and are wanting the Black Shard, the Shardolin, for purposes unknown at this point. So the party, of course, is not really wanting to hand it over. So they're thinking maybe we should just kill these guys, but maybe they're strong and we don't know how many are invisible. So they start talking to them and trying to find out more information about the Duergar, but things do quickly deteriorate and go into combat. I believe Dablin sparks it by rushing forward, or maybe it's Mythdorian launches a missile. Regardless of who threw the first blows, combat quickly starts. Now, one of the new spells Mythdorian picked up was Glitter Dust, which is a nifty spell in that it's kind of like Fairy Fire from D&D. You know about that. If you don't know either of these spells, then that's a useless comparison. But it basically gets rid of invisibility. It's kind of like the Moon Dust Bomb from Witcher 3. Anyways, again, more comparisons. That one's probably a better comparison than Fairy Fire. But anyways, it gets rid of invisibility effects because it basically dusts them. And then in addition to that, targets can become dazzled, which is a really cool effect in Pathfinder 5e, where it gives them, basically everyone is concealed from you if you're dazzled, and if targets are concealed from you, you have a flat check of 5 to see if you can even target them at all. So basically, attacks have a 25% chance of missing. This is what it breaks down to, of not even being able to roll. He launches that towards the first group, basically ruining their chances of becoming re-invisible. And also, a couple of them become dazzled, which in the first round of attacks actually plays in. One rolls a 3 and one rolls a 4 on the dice, so their attacks are ruined. and they have to load their crossbows and basically don't do anything for that round. So it worked really well. In addition to the 3 Duergar in front with shot crossbows, there's 2 more behind, along with a Taskmaster, which is a stronger Duergar, kind of the leader. Combat ensues. Mythdorian throws out another glitter bomb. Toulon cuts through a bunch of people. Dablin does some massive sneak attack damage, rolls a crit, deals a ton of damage. It's good times for sure. Carnage. The Duergar were a lot weaker than the party really anticipated. And while they did take some hits and things could have gone either way depending on the dice rolls, the party did well. Took out the group and captured one of them for interrogation. Now, Dablin, of course, is really turning into a great RP character with negotiation skills and intimidation skills. So intimidates the guy, works with him, trying to figure out like what they can do. They start kind of making a deal. The guy's telling him some information, tells him that death comes on black crystal wings, things like that. Lots of your doom is coming. But they finally hit a note when they start saying like, hey, what if we give you the shard to go back? Then will you tell us more about your people? He mentions Nildar, mentions that he is prince, a son of Zardarok Sunblight, who is apparently the king of these Duergar. This is the information that the party kind of gleans from him. He's very much just boastful, talks a big game. He doesn't actually know that much, but he does know that they are out on orders from Nildar, basically looking for Chardalyn. So the party is definitely interested in that. And so then the Dablin does hit that note where he says, hey, what if we give you the Chardalyn piece and you can be the hero? Then will you tell us more information? And greedily, of course, the Duergar starts agreeing and saying, yes, I'll take it back and I'll prove to Nildar that I'll prove to the people at Sunblight that I am better than Nildar. Because the party's like, yeah, what if we go kill Nildar? Will you tell us where he is? We'll give you the shard. You can go back to Sunblight, but tell us where Sunblight is too. So he does point out to the party roughly where Sunblight is, which is an important note. And also, additionally, does end up giving them information of where the secondary fortress is, which I also forgot to mention. The Duergar basically have a base camp, sort of expeditionary fortress built on the north edge of Kelvin's Cairn, where they've been sort of staging their Chardalyn raids from on this end of the Dale, far away from where Sunblight is, which of course is down in the spine of the world. So after getting that out of him by playing to his natural greed and with a couple good rolls and some good RP, Dablin slits the dude's throat and kills him. So poor Duergar didn't get what he wanted. But in any case, that's how it rolls sometimes. The party decided that they better go check out this fortress. So they head on up to the mountain and start doing some searching. Once again, Toulon, killing it with the survival, is able to find the fortress without too much trouble. They get caught in a blizzard along the way as well and are able to sort of make a camp and weather out the storm. But after about a day's time or so, they do make it to where this fortress is. And now they sort of scout the place out and they see that it's got kind of like a watchtower and then like built into the side of the mountain or the foothill, these stone walls and over a kind of a valley. And in the valley, it's very easy to see from several lookout points. They can see arrow slits. So walking up without any sort of stealth, probably unadvisable. So Toulon and Mythdorian hang back, and Dablin decides he's going to sneak up around kind of behind the watchtower. He does so and is able to sneak up around, and there's actually a creek that runs down through this valley, frozen of course, but it runs through a culvert, which Dablin is able to sort of skirt along the wall, crouched below the arrow slits, avoid notice, and climb in through the culvert and actually gain access to the fortress. inside, he finds a caged ogre, a large, fat ogre, and he's in a cage, and there's another cage with a couple goats as well, and he's basically sitting in there. And Dablin uses his telekinetic stone that they found back in the mine in Tourmaline to communicate to this ogre and basically tell him that he's the ogre's god. And through some good RP, able to convince the ogre that he should attack the dwarves and earn his freedom. They find out that the dwarves have basically made this ogre their slave and have been forcing him to carry them around on this sled, well, like a dog sled, except being pulled by an ogre. So Dablin convinces him that this is bad and he should want his freedom and that he should attack the dwarfs, and promises him goats and food and stew in return. So that goes well, and Dablin sort of skirts away as somebody's coming down the hall. Is able to get back into the culvert, avoiding notice, luckily enough, as a female Duergar comes in, picks in on the ogre, throws him sort of a scraps of a bone, and then walks back her post. Dablin then has stayed out of sight of the ogre at this point, but then tells the ogre, using his mind telekinetic stone, that a champion of this god will appear to unlock his cage and gain him his freedom. So it's going to be a goblin. Don't attack the goblin. The ogre agrees. Dablin comes up, is able to unlock the cage, and does unfortunately roll low at first to make a noise, but is able to quickly finish picking the lock and then get back to the culvert with avoiding notice again. And as the female dwarf comes in, the ogre comes out and kind of starts going to town. Dablin kind of crawls out as they hear chaos ensuing, and the ogre is running rampant, chasing them. As they're going out, Toulon and Midorian from down below see one of the Duergar trying to escape through an arrow slit on the watchtower, and then he gets yanked back in, and like one of his legs gets pulled off in the process and falls out through the arrow slit. And so it's pretty brutal. They wait for some time for things to quiet down, and then they go into the fortress to see what happened. The ogre is sitting there happily eating Duergar and trying to get the goats out of the cage because he wants more. He's taken out probably about 4 or 5 of the Duergar who are in the fortress. It's a pretty small fortress. The party was concerned it might be large, but there's only a few rooms. Quickly do some scouting down the hallway. They find sort of the barracks area, the lookout areas, an armory sort of storage area with some food. They do find some mushroom-based ale down there, which is actually not half bad tasting. And they offer some of that to the ogre as well, who happily drinks it because he's ravenous. He's an ogre glutton, by the way, which is a specific type of ogre, and basically he's always hungry and can swallow people whole. So it's good for the party that they're being friends with him for the moment. But in any case, they scout through. They find that the watchtower, while inaccessible from the outside, basically has a tunnel that leads into the fortress proper. And they basically find that there's one room in the back of the fortress with a barred door. Some traps have already been set off, which deterred the ogre from coming that way. And basically they come to the door and knock on it, and they're like, "Oh," they hear a voice from him, "Go away, ogre. You'll face your death for what you've done here." And this is Nildar, the leader of the dwarfs. The party basically says, "Oh, we came in, we found this place, and we killed the ogre." And then there's some tense communication between them. The party is able to basically tell him that, "Hey, we have some Chardolin. Open the door, and we'll treat with you to make a trade, maybe." So they do open the door, a couple guards, and instead of trying to trade, party just use that as a way to get in, and they basically start combat right away. Nildar grows to twice his size with his enlargement abilities. So do the other two. Beyond the two guards, there's also sort of an alchemist Duergar in there who throws a couple bombs that do some flash damage. Mythorian takes a good chunk of damage, but for the most part, Toulon and Dablin are very powerful, and they cut through the Duergar without too much problem, and also manage to capture Nildar alive at first. They do some more questioning. They find out from him that his father and the Duergar, the reason why they're gathering this crystalline is they're building a giant Chardalyn construct dragon to basically take over Icewind Dale. Because it's covered in darkness, it is now the ideal spot for the Duergar to start their above-ground empire. They aren't aligned with Auril, the Frostmaiden, as far as the party's aware, but they are trying to take over 10 towns and just generally take over Icewind Dale for themselves. So that's a new threat the party is now aware of. They also find quite a bit more Chardalyn that Nildar was keeping hold of, as well as some other items in there, some paperwork, as well as a note to his brother, who is apparently in East Haven. So East Haven looking like a good spot to go next. So after all that, they're going to take the ogre with them and make him their friend, but he's already asking for more food, and the party debates and basically decides that it may be a bad idea to have a ravenous ogre who may turn on you and eat you at any moment. Maybe that's a bad idea to keep around. So they basically tell the ogre that there's more dwarfs to go eat, more Duergar to go eat, and they'll come back for him. But they manage to sort of lock him in the fortress and leave for the time being. There's an angry ogre locked in there. The party is basically booking it, and that is about where the session ended for session 6. Bit of a shorter section. We played for a decent amount of time, but there was a lot of talking and stuff. I was not necessarily ready for them to go to East Haven, so I'm glad how it turned out. This last bit of these videos is always a bit rambly. My thoughts right now are that I have not been as prepared as I would like to be for this campaign. So far, it's been pretty good in actual play, but I am sort of going week to week. I mean, I know the story and everything. It's not bad. Just I'd like to have more of the Pathfinder conversions done. That's really the hold up there. And then yeah. I don't know if these videos are useful as a reference, or if anybody in our group will ever come back and watch these to remember, but I think they're a good record regardless. Well, that's going to be it for this one. If you enjoyed, great to have you around. There's going to be more coming. It's been a couple weeks since we played last, and it sounds like we might not play this weekend either, so might be a couple weeks before the next one of these, but catch you on the next one.